If I look at the next problem, the next one I'm graphing a system of inequalities, and really I just want to put both of these on here. So the first one I've got a y-intercept of 3 and a slope of -2. Since there's no equal to condition, I'm going to use a dotted line. The second one has a y-intercept of -2 and a slope of 1. And since there is an equal to condition, I'm going to use a solid line. And now I have to decide which section I'm going to shade. When I look at this, I think it's going to be this bottom section down here. So I'm going to choose a point from that section, and the point I'm going to choose is the ordered pair 0, -3. I'm going to choose this ordered pair right here, 0, -3. And I'm going to plug it in and see if it works. If I plug a 0 in for x and a -3 in for y, I get -3 is less than 3. And that's a true statement, so that works. If I plug a 0 in for x and a -3 in for y in the second equation, I get a -3 is less than or equal to a -2, which is also a true statement. And since each of those works, it means that that's the section I want to shade. So I shade in that section. And then the last thing I have to do is I can't have any solid lines that are not touching the shaded region. So I'm going to turn this solid line right here into a dotted line. And that's it. For the next one, I do the same thing. I start with the first equation. I've got a y-intercept of 1 and a slope of 1/2. That one has an equal to condition, so I'm going to use a solid line. The next one has a y-intercept of -3 and a slope of -1. And that one doesn't have an equal to condition, so I'm going to use a dotted line. And now I just need to decide which section I'm going to shade. Taking an educated guess, I think it's going to be this section over here, the one that contains 0, 0. So I'm going to choose the point 0, 0 and plug it in. If I plug 0, 0 into the first one, I get 0 is less than or equal to 1, which is a true statement. If I plug it into the second one, I get 0 is greater than a -3, which is also a true statement. So now I know that that's the section I want to shade. And once again, the last thing I have to deal with here is I shouldn't have any solid lines that are not touching the shaded region. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that into a dotted line. Okay, and that's it. For the next two, the first thing I have to do is change this into slope-intercept form. So I'm going to take this first equation and rewrite it in slope-intercept. I have to subtract the x from each side. So I get a -y is less than or equal to a -x plus 4. Then I have to divide each side by a -1. And be careful here, because this is an inequality, whenever I divide by a negative, I have to flip the inequality sign. So it becomes the greater than or equal to symbol. And then I have the x minus 4. If I take the second equation and solve that one for y, second inequality and solve it for y, I subtract the 2x from each side, and I get y is less than a -2x plus 4. Now I can graph each of these. The first one has a y-intercept of -4 and a slope of 1. There's an equal to condition, so I'm going to use a solid line. The second inequality has a y-intercept of 4 and a slope of -2. And there's no equal to condition, so I'm going to use a dotted line. And now taking an educated guess, I think that it's going to be this section over here that contains 0, 0. So I'm going to plug 0, 0 in. If I plug 0, 0 into this first inequality, I get 0 is greater than or equal to a -4, which is true. If I plug 0, 0 into the second inequality, I get 0 is less than a +4, which is also true. So now I know that this is the section that I'm going to shade. And then the last thing that I always look at, the last thing that I always have to take care of, is I shouldn't have any solid lines not touching the shaded region. So I should turn this into a dotted line right here. Okay? And now the last one, once again, I have to rearrange this a little bit. The first one, I've got to go ahead and add the x to each side. So I add the x to each side. And I find out that 1/2 y equals an x plus 3. I've got to multiply each side by 2, which gives me y equals a 2x plus 6. The second equation, I've got y plus 1 is less than or equal to a 2x. I've got to subtract the 1 from each side. So I find out that y is less than or equal to a 2x minus 1. And now I have to graph each of these. For the first one, it's got a y-intercept of 6 and a slope of 2. And there is there's no equal to condition there. I don't know why I changed that to an equal sign like a crazy person. That should be a greater than symbol. So there's no equal to condition there, so I am going to use a dotted line. The second one has a y-intercept of -1 and a slope of 2. And this one does have an equal to condition, so I'm going to use a solid line. And remember, there's always 4 options here: option 1, option 2, option 3. Option 4 would be no solution. But in order to find if it's option 4, I have to choose a point from each. And for this one, I want to be greater than that guy and less than that guy. So I think it actually is going to be no solution, so I'm going to choose a point from each. I'm going to choose the order pair -5, 0, 0, 0, and 1, 0. Okay. When I plug in -5, 0, that's going to give me a 0 is greater than a -10 plus 6. So 0 is greater than a -4, which is true. When I plug that into the second equation, I get 0 is less than or equal to 10 minus 1. So 0 is less than or equal to, a -10 minus 1, which is a -11. And that's not a true statement, so that doesn't work. So now I know it's not section 1. So now I try section 2. I plug in the 0, 0. When I plug in 0, 0 here, it gives me 0 is greater than 6, which right away is not true. So second section is not going to work. The last one I'm going to try is 1, 0. So I plug a 0 in for y. I plug a 1 in for x, and it gives me 0 is greater than 2 plus 6, which is 8. And 0 is not greater than 8. That's ridiculous. So I don't even need to bother plugging it into the second inequality. So this point didn't work, and this point didn't work, and this point didn't work. So that means it's none of these sections, which means it's option 4, which is no solution. Okay? And of course, the last thing I could do here is change this to a dotted line. Since it's not touching a shaded region, I don't need anything graphed because there is no solution. Okay? Hope this was helpful, and good luck on your test.